much for your patience. Having 700 gardeners learning to work with Zoom presentations, I can imagine this is, always a challenge. So this is a presentation that is 3 different seed libraries in the country and how they pivoted and adapted to the recent pandemic and what they're planning in the future. And before we get started, there's some housekeeping we just wanted to talk about. So we believe this session is being recorded and that links to the, there'll be links to the recording. Just a second, I'm trying to move the pictures. Okay. Links to the recording will be emailed via the Eventbrite link. The recordings will be available only for about 2 weeks. If you have questions, you can write them in the chat. And I thought that after each presentation, there'll be 3 different presentations. We can take a moment and answer those questions. Please fill in the survey. There'll be a survey after the end of this presentation, and we'll also have our contact information. And a link to this folder will be emailed to you after the summit today. We want to make sure that everyone knows that there's this wonderful movie being screened tonight. If you want to join us for a director's talk, it's at 6 p.m. You can buy your tickets today. It's a very inspiring movie. I highly recommend it. And if you do social media, here's the hashtags that you can use. Hashtag Seed Library Summit, Seed Share. So go ahead and spread the word, build our network. Let's get connected. And I realized I didn't introduce myself. Excuse me. I was a little thrown off by the technical difficulties at the beginning, but my name is Laurel Anderson, and I am in Sonoma County, California, and I'm a volunteer with the Community Seed Exchange. And I'll be presenting first on how we dealt with the pandemic. And then following that, we'll have Carrie and Kelly from the Rochester Public Library and the amazing Rebecca Newbern from Richmond Groves. So we'll all be sharing what our tactics were and what worked, what didn't work, what we're going to do in the future. So the Community Seed Exchange has been around for about 10 years. It's a grassroots seed library. And it's all volunteers. Here's our core group of volunteers. And as I said, we've been together for maybe 10 years. It started as a response to some of the work around Transition USA and how do we build a resilient community. And those of us that were gardeners and seed savers felt like, here's an effort that we can put our energy into that feels real and tangible. We want to grow locally adapted seeds in our community, make them available for free to the community, and hopefully also grow a network of local seed savers and to inspire the sharing economy. What is it like to just grow seeds, share seeds? So that's been our main effort. We have classes as well. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about our organization and what we offer and what we do, and then how we adapted to the pandemic. So before the pandemic, we had monthly classes in person. And every year we come up with what are the topics that are interesting and exciting to us. This was last year's or the year before's classes. Everything from, how do we choose the seeds we want to grow in our garden? How do we make the best choices? Thinking about how do we expand our gardening repertoire, growing grains. And we always include several classes on seed saving, because one of our primary goals is to keep educating the public on how to grow and save their own seeds. And the hope is that they'll start bringing seeds back to our seed library that we offer. Which I will say, we haven't grown as many seed savers as we thought. We still give away a lot more seeds than we actually get returned to our seed library. Here's a class out in our seed garden. We also have an annual seed swap. We work with we work with a couple of other nonprofits that support sustainable ag or seed diversity. And we have it at our local Grange, and hundreds of people come, and it's a huge, exciting party and seed giveaway, and hopefully inspiring the community about the sacred work of seed saving and this building a resilient seed shed, to use Ken Green's term. What is different, I think, about our seed library, and I wanted to just touch on a little bit, is that we're lucky enough to have some land and volunteers who can hold this. And we have a seed garden that's, I don't know, maybe a third of an acre. It's at our local Episcopal church. And they also provide the space for our seed library and classes. And so just here's some images of the seed garden. It's a pretty large space. And everything we grow is grown only for seed. So none of the crops are eaten. Everything is grown just to collect and save the seeds. So there's some lettuce going to seed. Looks like a Merlot lettuce. We grow biennial crops and save seed from them as well. So here it looks like a dragon carrot getting selected for the best carrot. Here's the carrot flowering. So some of the seeds we grow then takes 2 years before we're able to share them with others. We also do grow out a squash, which if you've ever had to take squash, it's a little more complicated, where you have to open the flower in the morning, pollinate, tape the flower closed. There's a whole process to make sure that the squash is not crossing with the squash growing at a neighbor's garden. So this looks like costata or romanesco summer squash. And we grow a lot of beans. We do like to grow high calorie crops, because part of our mission as well is to go towards food, like how much food can we grow in our gardens? So what are pantry foods, high calorie pantry foods we can grow for ourselves? And so, of course, if we're growing seed, we have to process the seeds. So there's a lot of time that takes to clean and process all the seed that we grow. Here's the pile of chaff. And all that seed ends up in our seed library, which is a classroom in the church. And then that is open weekly for an hour on Wednesdays and once a month pre-COVID. And folks can come in, it's all free. They have envelopes and they help themselves to whatever seeds they want. So when COVID hit, we had to think, okay, what are we going to do? We don't feel comfortable opening up the seed library. And so we decided to, and of course we had to start working together with masks on, which is not very easy to work in a garden. So we shifted to being really careful, working together, continuing to grow the seeds. And we decided to try an online seed ordering. So we selected 20 of the thought the seeds we had most plentiful and the most useful and the most easy to grow, created a Google form. Within an hour of posting the link to that Google form, we had 200 orders. It was quite overwhelming, the response. I would say definitely using this online ordering increased the amount of seeds that got out into the community by threefold. And what we decided to do is I took on the task for the last 2 years of packaging, taking the orders and packaging them and getting them out to the customers or to the people who signed up. So that's me filling seed orders. So it was a lot of sitting around. I mean, last year it was easier. This year, I think we were a little busier during the spring. Last year, the shelter in place was happening. So I was very happy to sit around packaging a lot of seeds. Last year in the spring, we had 400 orders. That's 4,000 seed packs that we distributed to the community for free. The folks could order up to 10 varieties. They would be placed in this paper bag with their last name on it. And then that order would be taken to the seed library and left outside. Here's my kitchen table. It's like that for about a month or two while this is happening. And it's such a simple system, really. And we just have some old plastic bins. We put the paper bags with the orders in the bins. It's a big overhang. They're safe from the weather. And folks would come and collect their seeds. Because it was so successful last year, we did 2 cycles this year. So we did a spring cycle and we did a summer seed selection cycle. And each cycle we did have about 400 orders or 4,000 seeds. So that was 8,000 seed packages that went out to the community this spring. One of the things we're thinking about with this is how to increase our education around the seeds that we're giving away. I think when you have free seeds, people just want to take a lot of seeds and maybe don't fully appreciate the work and the labor and care that went into growing that seed. So we're being more intentional about the education of please only really take what you will use and grow. You know, we're always asking people to, we do a lot of classes and a lot of newsletters around how to properly grow seed out to bring back to the library and what are the easiest seeds to grow out. We talked a lot this year about growing biennials so that these carrot seeds that people are ordering, they realize that that has been a 2-year process for us to grow that seed and select it, replant the carrot, let it flower, process that seed. It is one of the things that's happened. Not everybody picks up their orders. That can be discouraging. We have maybe like 40 orders that don't get picked up, which, you know, out of 400, that's 10%. So how to educate around the value of these locally grown seeds. What else to say about it? We did have a snafu this summer on the last cycle of the seed ordering, where the form I created, I forgot to include the email address as a requirement. And so it made it very complicated to let people know when their seed order was ready. So that's, I mean, always double checking your, your forms. And in terms of adaptation and what we're looking at moving forward at the Community Seed Exchange, we do feel like this system is something we would like to continue as long as we continue the education and feel like the seeds are really being valued. And then the other piece we're working on is regrowing out the same varieties that we feel do very well in this area, so that we are growing out locally adapted varieties for our region to share. So in terms of creating overall resilience with climate change, that the seeds we're growing will be adapted to the changing environments over time, over quite a bit of time. So that is pretty much all I have to say about our program. If there's any questions, I can stop sharing the screen and then I can take any questions. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what do you do with the vegetation that is left over? I think that must be the vegetation in the garden. We do compost everything that's left in the garden. So we have big compost piles. And the program I use for the seed orders, I just used a Google form. It's a free form you can download. And then we had descriptions of each variety and a photo of each variety. And oh, here's one thing. This was a good trick. You select one as the answer. So when the form that form can be transformed into a spreadsheet, and then you have the numbers and you can easily count how many packages of each variety you need. So you have to have the answer be a 1, not a yes or a no, so that you can collect the data easier. Hopefully that answers your question. And what 20 seeds did you choose? Well, it varied each season, but you know, we had greens and heirloom beans, fresh snap beans. I could, after this, I can share a link to the Google form if people want to take a look at it. I'll do that when I'm not trying to talk and do this at this moment. And then everyone can see what it looked like. We tried to have a nice breadth of variety: flowers, herbs, roots, squash. We have a pretty amazing inventory. We are really blessed with some extremely experienced gardeners and seed savers in our project who are passionate about this and retired, semi-retired, so they have time. So pretty remarkable. And if anyone wants to stay, oh, thanks for putting our website up. If anyone wants to stay in touch with us and is interested in growing your own seed for your seed library, we'd love to share what we've learned. And even if you just grew out some heirloom beans as a really easy first start. What is the oldest seed you swap? I mean, oldest in terms of like, I think of amaranths being like the lineage of amaranth being grown for thousands of years. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but in terms of the seed itself is usually no more than 2 years old, which does mean germination is pretty amazing when you have seed that's freshly grown. So that's another reason to grow some of your own seed. Does your group, yeah, does your group only save and give away non-patented seeds? Yes, we spend a lot of time in December looking at our favorite seed, organic, small, locally owned seed companies and choose varieties that either we've already grown, we're familiar with, we know will do well in this region. We always throw in a few new ones, but we're very intentional about the seed that we grow and where we source our seed from. And there's a link on our website to our favorite seed companies that we'd like to promote. Let's see. And if you just joined us and you're a participant and you have not muted your screen, if you could please do that, that would be great. We're getting some background noise. Okay, so I think that looks like all the questions, and I'm going to turn over the presentation to Kelly and Carrie from the Richmond Library.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Ray Kirkpatrick from Rochester, Minnesota. And I'm just going to unmute Carrie here. Where is Carrie? There we go. Okay, Carrie, I've asked you to unmute.
Hi, I'm Carrie Osby from Rochester Public Library in Rochester, Minnesota.
Just checking to make sure that everybody is muted for the presentation if you're a participant. Yeah, I think I've got everybody done here. So Carrie, do you want to share your screen or would you like me to share mine?
Why don't you go ahead and share yours if you're able to, Kelly?
Okie dokie. Oh. Oh my goodness. Carrie, you go ahead and share yours. Mine is, I'm looking for this here and I'm not.
It's not letting me share.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I've got it. Okay. Looking for presentation mode. Where is that?
If you go up to slideshow.
Yes. Do you want me to play from start, play narrations?
Let's play from start.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Ray Kirkpatrick. I am co-founder of the Seed Library at Rochester Public Library.
And I am Carrie Osby. I am the head of technical services at Rochester Public Library.
So we began the Seed Library in 2018. I'm co-founder, and a friend of mine and I decided we wanted to propose the Seed Library, and it was wildly accepted by the Rochester Public Library. And the purpose was to increase knowledge of our food system, inform about growing food, and seed saving. The purpose was to offer free access to seeds for all and provide resources for growing food. We had a vast amount of partners that came on board in the course of the last 3 years. Our research and planning actually started the summer of 2018. We did outreach at the farmers market with University of Minnesota Extension SNAP Ed, University of Minnesota Extension Master Gardeners, Backyard Bounty Urban Homesteading Meetup Group, Plant a Seed, and of course the Rochester Public Library. What we were able to do is gather folks' information on what seeds they would want the Seed Library to have. We have a very, very large demographic of folks in our city of about 100,000. We're an island community in Southeast Minnesota, but we speak over 16 different languages here, and we have a very high immigrant and multicultural community, Hispanic, Latinx, Somali, Ethiopian, Cambodian. So lots of great community members here. Once we decided how we were going to proceed with the Seed Library and offered some seed saving classes in the fall and ramped up our participation and knowledge of what was going to be coming, we purchased our bulk seeds from Seed Savers Exchange. It was really important for us to work with a local provider so that our seeds would be already married to the climate that is here in kind of this Decorah Edge driftless zone, where we've got some interesting weather patterns that happen. So seed packaging involved over 100 volunteers, and we packaged over 6,600 seeds on our first 2 weekends. You can see some of the packaging things that we used. We had labels. We received our grant from the Clean Water Land Legacy Act, as well as Rochester Area Foundation. And we also used RFID tags to use a checkout system so that anyone with a Minnesota library card would be eligible to take for free 10 packages of seeds. It enabled us to document the seeds going out and kind of tracking our orders. We printed trifold how-to guides for most of the groupings of the varieties that we offered. And we have handouts from University of Minnesota Extension, as well as handouts from Seed Savers Exchange on building your own seed frames, doing things such as seed saving, how to grow, how to cook, how you might use your veg. There's also documents available that would help you with late summer crop starting, fall crop starting, seeding for cover crops, as well as crop rotation. Our programming and promotion, like I said, involved seed saving classes. We invited youth and adults to come in for some special presentations. We offered the Seed film, which also highlights Vandana Shiva's work through her recent years in India and the things that she's done since she was a member of CHIPCO. And we had seed frame making, and we had seed cleaning, collecting, and packaging for the youth with some of our program promotion as well. Our seed library was placed in a location on the second floor of our library, and we designed it to fit into an alcove that used to be the copy machine area. And as you can see, if you can see my cursor on the screen here, where is it? Right here. So this larger, tall, vertical shelf. This is the first year we opened. We've since expanded, but this tall shelf is where our checkout seeds were. And then the wooden card catalog is where our community donated seeds were found. And you can take as many of those as you need. And our first year, due to our highly cultural community, the diversity that we have in our community, we offered our seed lists in 4 different languages. We were able to expand our English list into Spanish, Arabic, and Somali, our first year. We carry 44 different packages, varieties of seeds, and our grand opening was on March 2nd. And it was pretty great. Carrie, do you want to take it from there?
Sure, I'll have you go to the next slide. So one of the things we can do, because we are very formalized in our checkout system, we have each seed packet is almost like a book with a barcode and a RFID tag. We're able to use some of our checkout data to map it on the USDA food maps, because we were curious to make sure we were getting our seeds out into areas that maybe were low income or low access, and to see how successful we were. The first year, we were able to see that 88% of our seeds checked out to low access areas. Those are the purple ones. And I'll go to the next slide, Kelly.
Oh, I've lost my cursor. There it is.
And then our year ended in August of 2019, and we were almost out. Over 8,500 seed packets went out. The 6,000 number that Kelly mentioned earlier was just from that stand area. We do not have the donated seeds that are in the card catalog actually in the catalog last year, so we just did that by hand. Next slide. So we had such a successful 2019, we decided to do it again pre-pandemic, but we also still had to be even more creative because the library suffered a huge water leak that took out half the library rooms. So we didn't have any of the areas that we had originally planned on using for packing seeds and stuff, but we made it work with partners out in the community. We went bigger and better, 12,000 seed packets, larger rack. We expanded our seed list into Chinese and Khmer, and we had even more partners and events at the grand opening. And next slide. And we had a grand opening on February 29th, 2020. We had people all over the place. Our auditorium was full with partners and tables. We had people upstairs checking out seeds. At least over 1,000 packets of seeds went out that day. Next slide. And then the pandemic came. So March 17th, the library building closed to the public, and we only had maybe 20% of the collection out at that point. Next slide. And so we were kind of panicking. How do we get these seeds out that need to be very timely? And so the first thing we did was we worked with our partners like Kelly and found larger organizations that we could check out a lot of seeds to. Oak Terrace is a manufactured home community that has a larger Hispanic population that we worked with. So we checked out a bunch of seeds that they requested. Next slide. And then the building closed the staff, so nobody could have access to the seed library. So how are we going to get these out? Next slide. We sent thousands of seeds home with poor Christy, and we used an online form very similar to Laurel. And Christy mailed seeds based on people's requests for forms. So we mailed seeds for the first month and a half of the pandemic. Next slide. And then we, the second Saturday after we had this form out, we advertised it on Facebook and social media. And the response was so overwhelming, we had to shut the form down that same day. And then it took a couple of weeks to even get caught up filling all the forms. Next slide. And that's Kelly.
So one of the things we did was virtual programming. We ramped up, as everybody did, their webinars, their Zoom meetings, everything. And we did a plan a garden for seed saving, because if you're going to be saving seeds, you want to know techniques such as isolation. Species can outcross if you're growing similar species next to each other, instead of having just one species isolated from another species. And we taught classes on that. The master gardeners did a a presentation just on garden questions where people could just call in and we'd ask questions, which was a lot of fun. And then we also did a seed saving class that went through the differences, why you'd want to save seed, the way to save seed that's dry, the way to save seed that's wet, certain varieties such as tomato and cucumber that need to be fermented before we actually save those seeds, and pretty high success rate with our virtual programming.
One of the things we were able to do then too, along with the virtual programming, is we had a grant that allowed us to do surveys to people who had checked out seeds, as well as we put it on our website, and we had an overwhelming positive response. The 0.35 negative was one person out of the 284, and we received very wonderful comments about this program. Next slide. And then again, we wanted to do again, but once again, we had to be even more creative because this time we couldn't even get people together to package seeds. So we made seed saving kits, and again, worked with our partners, particularly the Extension Master Gardeners, to create kits with everything they needed to package our seeds. And we had pickup seed days, a couple Saturdays, and then when people were ready to return, they dropped them back off at the library. Next slide. And then because they were coming from the outside, we had to quarantine them for 3 days, just like we have all our other materials quarantined. Next slide. And then we couldn't have our grand opening in the auditorium with lots of people because the building was still closed. We've instead, at that point, seeds were only available to place on hold and pick up from curbside. Next slide. And so the first week, we probably pulled about 3,000 packets of seeds for people. Those are things we had to trap holds on each individual item, and then we packaged them in envelopes for each person. Next slide. And luckily, at the end of March, March, I can't even remember dates anymore, we were able to open the building again for Library Express. So 4 days a week, people can come in and look through seeds again and check out their own seeds. Next slide.
So this year, we're also planning virtual programming. We've got some potato planting. The library has also stepped up to do some fun little videos on YouTube that actually helped a lot with our curbside pickup and the pickup for seed packaging. We kind of transferred everything to virtual, and so that people could log in on the Seed Library website, and you can place your holds for your seeds, and then they're packaged there. We're going to be offering classes throughout the summer again. So we do continue to do the curbside pickup on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then the express pickup just available at the window walk-ups that were installed specifically for the pandemic, but they'll be used continued moving forward at the library space. But the shift has clearly gone to virtual at this point, and we're seeing that offering these kinds of things creates even greater access to the library from what we had noticed before.
Yep, and something Kelly talked about, we, in some of our surveys and even back at the farmer's market, people have been pushing us because they wanted potatoes. So we're trying seed potatoes this year that are available for people, and our onion sets just came in.
Whoops.
Oh, go ahead. That's the next slide.
Sorry about that. I clicked the button. So sustainability is a real big deal for us. As I had said earlier, we're purchasing our seed from mostly Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. It's about an hour south of here. But we've also had to purchase some of our specific seeds, such as our opal gourd that was requested by many of our African immigrant community members. We've also got bitter melon, which is an Asian, South Asian vegetable. And then we've got some other offerings like an Ethiopian kale, specific varieties that our diverse community has requested. And this is a package of shiso. So we do encourage people to bring back their seeds. And as you can see in the upper left corner here, this is how a package of perilla or shiso came in. This particular patron had saved their own seed. And then what we had to do was clean it. We cleaned it in a bin in the library. And then usually our seed is returned with a seed donation form, and then we repackage it. And you can see how our packaging looks. We've kind of changed it a little bit now. We're not dealing with dyed envelopes, bleached and dyed envelopes anymore. We have natural envelopes. We're trying to be as sustainable as possible. And so on our front label, we have the variety. And then on the back label, we have a growing guide and some germination and some germination information, just like you'd find on the back of a regular seed packet. So sustainability is real key. Our objective is to not have to purchase any seed in bulk whatsoever from any of our grant providers or from the funding that we receive through the Library Foundation, and to have all of our seed coming back. One of the things that we've done this year is we're doing seed grow outs with our Olmsted County Extension Master Gardeners. Many of the Master Gardeners, whether they're interns, active members, emeritus, or even on the leadership team, they are taking particular varieties of seed and growing them out to seed. And then we will gather those in the fall when the seeds are ripened. We'll do the cleaning, and then those we'll do germ tests on them, and then they can go out in our seed stock. And that's something that can be done under the pandemic. And it's been a big shift as you know, we're all kind of suffering from not having funding and sales and that kind of thing. So not being able to rely on the grants in the future will benefit the library significantly. So thank you. Thank you very much for listening. And here is our link to our seed library. Like I said, it's got quite a few videos on it, some outreach information, some PDFs that you can download that you could use personally or even as inspiration for your seed libraries. And there's also our contact information. And we've got do we have a separate Facebook page for the seed library, Carrie?
Nope, but you can find us on the Rochester Public Library's Facebook page and Instagram.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here, and then we can get to any questions that were put in the chat. Do we see any here?
I don't think so. I think it's probably Rebecca's turn.
Okay. All right. I'm going to make you host, Rebecca. As soon as I find you here in this list. There you are. I've asked you to unmute.
Okay.
And now I'm making you host.
Great. And there's two questions just quickly that you might want to answer. One was says, since you use barcodes and RFID on your seed packets, how does your ILS deal with checkout? So maybe answer that before I kind of.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's really a good question for Carrie, and you're muted right now. So let me unmute you, Carrie. Actually, you're going to have to unmute Carrie, please, Rebecca.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a question for her. Carrie's head of technical services at our library. Our library won the National Award for Museum and Library Science in 2018. There were only 5 awards of those given out. So they're an excellent partner for our seed library. And the RFID tags actually were what made it possible for us to track where the seeds went. And if I have the story correctly, while Carrie's getting unmuted there, what was really great about that is they were able to use that data. We found that 88% of our seeds went to low income, low access folks in our community. In 2006, we did not have any food deserts, and our city has grown so fast, so quickly in the last 10 to 15 years that we've got a significant amount of food deserts, food apartheid happening. And the bookmobile, we put fresh veg on our bookmobile, and the bookmobile actually altered its summer playlist route according to our seed library checkouts to kind of get that bookmobile into more of those low income, low access neighborhoods. Are you unmuted, Carrie?
I am unmuted, and I want to make sure Rebecca has enough time. So
we're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Basically, I started to do it in the chat too. They act like any other book. We let people check them out at the self-checks, or they take them to the desk. They have a due date of never, so they're not due. And it is slightly awkward. The reason we have them in the catalog is a lot for data collection. And that sounds scary and creepy, but it's just so we can keep track of inventory mostly. I can run a report and I can tell you how many we have out or how many yes, they do. We have to move them off the patrons account ourselves. So yes, they do. And I would have to say that is one thing that really annoys people, is that they sit on there longer than they would like them to be, even though they're never due.
And I see a couple more questions coming in. One is about what return donor rate did you experience with seed borrowers? How many patrons, example,
I would say what Kelly said, less than 10%. I will tell you, about an hour ago, someone just dropped off a bunch of seeds at the reference desk though. So
That's been kind of a thing. I don't think people understand into packaging 12,000 packages of seeds that we move in a season. We're a national leader, and it takes time to design a label, to design a how-to guide, to gather people to do this, especially under the packaging constraints we had with COVID. So we really like those seeds to come in the fall so we can organize them, get them packaged, and then be ready to go at opening. But we appreciate all the donations we get, and we can sort through them. And a great place to have a seed library is at a public library because it's climate controlled. It's unless the water
unless you have
softener.
a water softener explode and dump
Yeah.
tons of thousands of gallons in your building.
Yeah.
But they didn't hurt the
I
seed.
see another question about how does your ILS know there's no due date?
We were able to set it. You literally, when you check it out and you get your receipt, they say never.
Yeah, and I know that Pima County in Tucson, Arizona has the same thing. So there's no due date, and there's obviously no fines associated with the checkouts.
Yep, I just have to ask the computer center to run a report and just remove all of them from people's accounts.
Our library is pretty cool too. It has its own charter in the city, and they've actually removed all fines for any patrons. So no fines are accrued at all on anything that's checked out. Artwork, music, DVDs, seeds, books. Yeah.
That's wonderful. But just know it is possible to have that as a system option.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. It's lovely to see the amazing amount of outreach you have to, different communities and all the language translations. I don't know if you can make any of those files available into those different languages so that, other communities don't have to get translations done, or at least to see how maybe you form it. It'd be lovely. So we are going to have an opportunity later to kind of put things into a shared folder. And so maybe some of those resources can be added in there for the benefit of other people to see what you've done there. So I am Rebecca Newbern. I am the co-founder of the Richmond Grows Seed Lending Library in Richmond, California. I'll give a little bit of background about our library and then just how did we have to pivot when COVID started. Another thing is, besides being the co-founder of Richmond Grows Seed Lending Library, I am also on the city's community emergency response team, as well as a community emergency response team or CERT trainer. So for me, this was kind of a fusion of two of my, areas of focus. And so I was, kind of looking down the road of how do we respond? I'm just going to move my slides over just a second. How do we respond to this crisis and embed this into our kind of emergency response and make the city aware that this should be part of their emergency response. So I want to first start with just our values. So our seed library, we opened in May of 2010, and we were the 7th seed library to open, the first one being the Bay Area Seed Library, Bay Area Seed Interchange Library, which is Basil, which is the people that were hosting the keynote, if you had an opportunity to see Jeff Quattrone this morning. And we were focused on, how do we engage in sustainability? And I'm really grateful. I mean, I know Carrie and Kelly and Laurel are all very committed to sustainability. So I think when you start your seed library, knowing what are your values and what is your vision is super important. We were originally thinking about how can we, create locally grown seeds, and that's going to increase local adaptation to seeds. It's going to increase biodiversity, community resilience, self-reliance, while also kind of creating this culture of sharing. And that's kind of the value. That's where we've been focused on. We have for ourselves really for the last, we started our library. We were, like many seed libraries, starting with donations from seed companies. And then over the last few years, we've been able to transition to a 100% local seed library. Also, big shout out to Laurel and the Community Seed Exchange, because some of the things that are harder for us to grow, such as corn, we will often get donations from them because we can't do it. We're in a much more urban setting. And, they're kind of suburban, but they also have that farm, that kind of a seed garden, which enables them to grow some kind of things that are harder for us to do in a smaller urban setting. And so we've really focused on how do we increase food security while also making, instead of just offering things that are commonly available in the grocery store or in, seed companies, can we find things that are unusual, hopefully culturally relevant to our communities here? And we have a very diverse, lots of different communities, different speaking groups, mostly Laotian and Spanish being the number one next to English in our community. So seeing how we can kind of increase our diversity in the seeds that we offer and having it 100% local, while also accessing and supporting community resilience. Now, so as we all know, March did a major shift for so everybody in some way or forms, lives have been changed through, COVID. The public library. So we are located in the public library. We are not, we're a group of volunteers that are in the public library. So we have put a minimum impact on the public library. So they pretty much provide the space and we do all of the servicing of it. I mean, obviously they're super generous in terms of explaining things to people that come in, but it's really a nonprofit inside of a public library. So all of a sudden the library got closed down, the seeds were locked in there. And even if we had been able to get in there, we had lots of small, quantities, lots of small quantities of lots of different seeds. And, we had to think about how do we get lots of seeds out in a very fast manner, and having to package, lots of things did not make, lots of this, like we've got 15 different types of lettuce. We're just like, this is not going to work. We just need to offer one type of lettuce so that people aren't touching packets and they're not going through things. They're just like, I want a lettuce, I'm going to grab a lettuce. I want a zucchini, I'm going to grab a zucchini. As opposed to having a lot of choice, we went for fewer options. So we kind of had to rethink the, diversity and the local seeds to how do we meet this moment right now? And how we met this moment was we actually ended up purchasing a bunch of seeds, through companies that we were aligned with, but realizing that our previous method of self-serve in jars was not going to work. Everything had to be individually packaged. We needed to have lots of one quantity. We had to have a safety protocol. So there's a video link to our safety precautions. Once again, now that's not as much of a concern because the transmission is known to be more by aerosols than by touching surfaces. Obviously, always it's good practice, but it's not really the main concern at this point. But for future viruses and for future epidemics, definitely good to have that in mind. Now, so we're looking at different issues that we had and how to resolve them. So the first was the public library is closed. And we have for years been talking about how do we get more out to the community? How do we get more people engaged? So we took this challenge as an opportunity to really open things up and see how can we rethink and revision our programming. We went with putting seed libraries around the community, and we had 15 different libraries around the community. And this really allowed us to engage with a broader spectrum of the population. So instead of it just being people that go to the main branch of the public library, and we have, I think, 5 different libraries in our community, because we're a community of about over 115,000. This, enabled people to just come across it and find it and discover it and engage with it and get involved. Now, we wanted to really open it up and see where were some of the best places maybe we could have seed libraries. So we put out surveys to the community on Facebook and on social media, including Nextdoor, and just asking different people if they had any suggestions for where might be a good library host. And so we were able to get some of the locations via suggestions through the community. We also, whenever we engaged with a host, we also wanted to inform them of our COVID protocols and the program, what we were asking of them, which was most basically, can you provide a space for us? And then what we were going to do, which is we're going to be coming in, once a week and servicing it, filling in, adding more seeds. And everything was in English and Spanish because those are our 2 primary languages spoken in our community. And we also, on our packaging, so what we did is we have these self-stampers. So we got a self-stamper for just our, where you can get the information from the seed library, about the seed library. We had them in English and Spanish, and then we had the varietal name, and then as well as the English and Spanish name for the species on all of our packages. And this here, the photo on the right is just an example that we shared to the hosts, so they had a sense of what they were committing to, so that they knew, like, we're asking you to put some signs out. You're going to get 2 little cigar boxes. So these are little cigar boxes that had the information. So these were for the indoor places where they might be going on a counter, and then we had outdoor spaces as well. And once again, we were really thinking how, where are high traffic areas, where are high need areas? So we were looking for trying to find that balance of, can we have different geographic locations, areas that might be in places that have less access to food or to nurseries, and really also reaching out to some specific communities. For example, we had one at the Latina Center, which was really focused on supporting the Latina community, in particular the monolingual population. And so we had one on their community center fence. We were in a number of community markets. We were in a church parking lot that was next to a park, but also across the street from the high school, which wasn't necessarily in session at that point, but just in terms of it. And they also have a food pantry there. So there was a number of kind of like communities that were connected by, were available to see that there. And then this one here on the bottom left is at my house. We were in a bike co-op, and then we also had a couple of urban ag places. One is a public kind of self-serve, people can volunteer on this greenway area, and then also harvest the food. And we also had a seed library there. And that's a very highly trafficked area. So we were looking at how do we engage with people that maybe aren't familiar with the services that we were providing earlier. And we also realized that we were going to be in a very different place in terms of the number of community members we were going to need to help with this project. And so as a result, we reached out to a number of community organizations. The first thing we were doing was, could we give them seeds, and then they could distribute them to people that they had a relationship with, especially, the Asian population and Hispanic population. At first, we got 0 responses. And, I think everyone originally was just completely overwhelmed by COVID, nonprofits that were used to being in person, teaching in person, all of a sudden not being able to do that and having to rethink their programming. So at first we didn't get any responses. Later on, when I think people got a little bit more settled, we were able to do some partnering. And as a result, we had some really interesting things. One was a group that was able to give out seed packets, and they got it translated for us. And then they actually gave plants out to the people, and then we're able to follow through with the group. So that was nice. And we're hoping to do more of that this year. Also, because we needed the volume of what we wanted to do, or the scope of what we wanted to do was pretty big, because we knew the need was so high in our community. We just put out calls for volunteers through social media, through Nextdoor, through friends, through garden clubs. And we got about 60 volunteers, people that are volunteering to pack, distribute, clean seeds, people teaching classes, people promoting social media. And, I'm a big fan of Google Forms. So I just put out a link on, like, want to volunteer, want to host a seed library, and we were able to get a lot of people engaged through just that. And once again, if you have a form to collect your information, you're going to get all the information you need, and it's going to be easy to sort. So I just highly recommend some of your back end structural pieces being spreadsheets. And once again, if you do something like Google Forms or some other survey means, being able to have a spreadsheet that's going to help you kind of organize data. So I could click on, we have a class coming up, who are all the people that said social media, and then I can send out a link to them. Here's what we need you to post. Can you get this out to, your community? Can you post it on your personal account? And, most of our classes, filled up, normally on Eventbrite, you have 100 slots. We would make 160 slots available, and almost all of them filled in 4 days. So, and we offered 12 classes last summer from the beginning of the pandemic. So once again, as I started this, I was talking about, what is the purpose of your seed library? And for some people, for some seed libraries and communities, it's just, we need to get more people growing seeds. We were thinking, we started with a community where there's a lot of community members that are involved in gardening. So we weren't there so much as we started with, we want to get people to save seeds. But we realized at this moment, we also wanted to engage those people that maybe weren't gardeners, because a lot of people were staying home or had to stay home and, had time, were concerned about food, whether it was concerns about going to the grocery store or just wanting to be able to be outside more, but not wanting to go other places and being just in their garden, being in their yards. And so we wanted to make more resources available to those people who were interested in becoming new gardeners. As a result, we created an online gardening forum, and that was really to support people that were attending our Absolute Beginners Gardening class and saying, okay, now that you've attended this class, how can we support you moving forward? And so that was a place for them to kind of join in. And we had a number of master gardeners and other experienced gardeners. So if someone had a question, someone who was experienced was answering the question, as opposed to all the other new gardeners answering the questions. We also created on our website, richmondgrowseeds.org. So at richmondgrowseeds.org, we put in a new page about new to gardening. And we also had all of those resources translated into Spanish. So pretty much everything we did, we got translated into Spanish. I'm going to put our website in the chat, richmondgrowseeds.org. And as I said, we had been mostly 100 locally grown during the pandemic, bulk quantities of seeds. And my house, because it was, my seed library, and I could go and, we did the smaller quantities of things that were locally grown at my house, just because I was able to go out and go like, oh, we've only got 20 packets of this, and I could update it. Whereas the other seed libraries were serviced once a week. The outdoor ones we did twice a week, and we try to be consistent about it, saying, okay, Mondays and Thursdays or Mondays and Fridays. And so we had a particular time of the week so that people knew when the new seeds were coming in. And as I mentioned, we also went from jars in the public library to everything being self-serve. Jars and self-serve to everything being individually packaged, which was a lot more work, but kind of really an important safety concern at that point. And you can see kind of our method of doing it, where we had the stampers and the self-inking stamps, and we just would basically have, packages, like you'd get a box and you'd have your seeds and all that, and we'd send them off to the volunteers. And it was just this rotating, my front porch was a rotating revolving door for a while of seeds and envelopes. So as I mentioned, we realized there was going to be a major need to level up in terms of the number of people that were gardening, as well as really wanting to encourage people to do seed saving. So we created an Absolute Beginners Gardening class. There's a link to the PDF of our Absolute Gardeners class. We are hoping to offer it in Spanish. It is translated, thanks to one of the workers at the Ecology Center. She translated our Absolute Beginners class into Spanish. So we are going to be offering that in Spanish. And what we also did was, we've been teaching for years seed saving classes about best practices about seed saving and varietal purity. And what we did instead was we had a transition to kind of like, we're now in a crisis. How does that change our choices? Also, if you have a question, if you could put questions in the chat box, that would be great. I'm monitoring that as I go. And so we created this very different class. And I am offering this class twice in the next 2 weeks. In May. Let's see, I'll put that link in the chat box. I'm going to go over there. I'm just kind of switch off that for a second. So I am offering this seed saving in a time of crisis class 2 times. And the idea is, in normal times, you have your requirements and what you're looking for. And obviously your priorities change when we're in a time of crisis. And things that might, and if you come to the next session, so the next session I'm going to be doing is at 1 o'clock, which is climate adaptation and seed libraries. And so we're going to have some really exciting panelists. One is Daniela Soleri, who is research at UC Santa Barbara, and she's written an amazing book about our changing world and gardening. And then the other person is Kay Everett, who is from Oak Grove, Oregon, and she is really looking at land races, which is the kind of variety that's local to a particular place, as well as how do we reinvigorate biodiversity in this time of kind of crisis, as we've lost so much biodiversity. And then I'll be talking more from a kind of an organizational perspective of how do you, what are some of the choices you might want to be making. And then some of the other kind of educational and programming things is we had to really redesign our seed saving brochure. So one of the things we've not got a lot of returns on, or at least ones that we were trusting of, was the hand pollination of squash. So we're hoping this year we can get more people to do hand pollination. And so we've added that into our brochure. And once again, we have that on there, and I will add once again eventually the Spanish version of that, which is being translated right now. Okay, let's see, hold on. And lost where am my slides? There we go. Another thing that we kind of changed this year, or kind of added into our programming, was that normally in California, there's this really amazing, actually, before I get to this, I'll answer the question that someone had in the chat. How do you feel confident that your seed donations from the community are viable and true to type? Awesome question. So I think this goes to a couple of things. You have to really, normally what we do is when we're in the public library, we have a box where people put the seeds in, and then we kind of go through them and kind of decide whether or not we're going to put them in the collection or not. And if we're going to put them in the collection or not, do we need to put it with a caveat or not? Now, this whole idea of true to type is, I think, a much more modern term, because historically, if you lived in an area, people were not hand pollinating their squash. It was much more of an expression of what the community liked. And there's, some, variance in terms of how things might have appeared. And so kind of the modern true to type, purity thing is much more of a commercial aspect. Sorry, my thing's over there. And what I would say is, we have obviously in the past looked at this. And for example, if someone returns sunflower seeds, which are insect pollinated, we're still going to share sunflower seeds, but we will just mark on it crossed. And we actually have a stamp that's red, bold, with crossed question mark. And we just stamp. Typically in the past, when someone has donated squash seeds to us and we have, not known the grower, we have often just, we've just often composted those. I think now we might be a little bit more flexible, and also just kind of realizing, and this is another thing, we also ask people when they return seeds to put the year on them. And we do have a guide, which I will put in the resource folder, the public folder, about the seed viability, because there are some things, and it depends on the species, of how long they are. So for example, onions, 1 to 2 years, the viability is really low. So if we get old onion seeds, we'll just toss those. But if it was something like squash and it's several years old, we would probably still include it in our collection. And now this is another thing that we added into our programming this year, or into our offerings this year, was a cuttings giveaway. And there's a wonderful organization that's called the California Rare Fruit Growers. There's lots of different chapters. They even have chapters in Hawaii and Arizona, even though it's a California Rare Fruit Growers. And they have this amazing gathering called a scion exchange, where you can get either a scion as a piece of wood that you attach onto an existing tree for apple to apple, and then everything above that would be that particular variety. So every honey crisp that you've ever tasted came from one original honey crisp tree. So they're all the offspring of one tree. They do not come out true to type. And we knew that the Scion Exchange was going to be closed. And so I just decided, I've got several pomegranates and grapes and figs. And so I just did a massive cutting giveaway. And then a couple of my friends heard about it and they, gave me some of their cuttings. And we gave, in about a week, we gave away 500 plus scions of, figs, currants, grapes, and pomegranates. And there is a list, and I'll put it, I think there's on the sheet, there's an instructional sheet that basically said from people that were taking the cuttings, what they could do. And we didn't give any scions away. We were just saying, so what I mean by we were talking, and I should not have said cuttings. I should have not said scions. I should have said cuttings. So these are things that are propagated by, like, you can take it, stick it in a pot, and it will grow. So you can't do that to an apple branch, but you could do it to these ones. So I will change the name on that to not from cuttings to, not from scions to cuttings. Cuttings is the correct term here. And then you can see Laurel also just said they, typically don't include corn or squash unless they know the grower. Yes. And once again, during a crisis, some of that rigidity in terms of varietal purity is less important, because it's like when people need to grow food, I've noticed I spent all of this time, and I don't have an example right in front of me, but I spent all of this time saying, here's the variety of squash that we're offering, here's how to plant it. And while I was watching people engage with coming to get material from our seed library, people just grabbing the packet, people didn't read, they just like, squash, I want a squash. And so there are people that are very interested in, I want this particular variety. And there are also some people that are very just like, I just want to grow something, and that's a squash. And so I think that there's place for kind of a yes and model of like, yes, we want to preserve particular varieties, during COVID and during the just crisis in general. And also we want to be opening it up. So we also are doing this purple tree collard giveaway, where the purple tree collard is the official green of Richmond, California. And we are super excited about it. It was brought up through the South when a lot of people, African-American people, moved up to the Bay Area to work in the shipyard factories during World War II. And they brought this perennial green. We got it 10 years ago, that worked with the mayor and got it as the official green of Richmond, California. And so our goal is to pass out 500 cuttings or plants this year. I think we're at like 350 right now. We've got this big event in July. There's a woman in our community who's writing a book about the purple tree collard in Richmond. And so we're going to have a community cleanup. We're going to give away the cuttings. It's going to be an outdoor event, obviously, because we're cleaning up an outdoor area that tends to get a little bit blighted. And we're also going to offer cuttings to anybody who walks by and is interested. And we will eventually be having a website about this if you do grow purple tree collard in your areas. And this project was going to be in part supported by a small grant that we got through the city. And then kind of what you heard Kelly mentioning earlier is about the grow a row. So this year we're really trying to see, can we, get back into our kind of alignment with locally grown seeds. We had last year been doing the Grow Row program during the pandemic. We had about 15 growers, but just the amount of we passed out 20,000 seed packets since the beginning of the pandemic. And just like trying to get one person to grow a little pack of seeds, we're just like, okay, we're doing such volume at this point that, last year we're just like, oh, that's not going to work. And so we reached out to some larger urban ag folks to see if they had donations or if they would be willing to grow a row or grow a bed for us. We reached out to a horticulture department. So we were able to get some larger donations through those people. Now that things have settled down a little bit, the second year into the pandemic, we've been able to get a volunteer who's specifically doing the Grow a Row program. And once again, the Grow a Row program is asking people in the community to specifically say, I'm willing to dedicate a row of my garden to grow something out for the benefit of the community all the way to seed. So our goal is to get 40 growers. I think we're at about 20 right now for the spring, and see if we can double that for the summer. and also seeing if we can get more people to do hand pollination this summer. So that's going to be one of the things we're going to see within that summer grad, if we can get people to hand pollinate. And we're trying to see how can we get some kind of momentum. So I think someone was asking earlier about getting people engaged in their seed library. This is on the previous one I did. And, we've really started to use Instagram. I'm not a social media person, but one of our volunteers is. And so this is the way that we're going to be kind of connecting a lot, is through Instagram. So when we put seeds in a seed library, instead of me trying to do it on a database and then put it up on the web so people can see what seed library has what seeds, we're just going to take photos of, here's the seed library, use a common hashtag like hashtag Richmond grows, hashtag, available seeds. We don't know what the hashtags are yet. And then people can follow us on Instagram, find out what, oh, the seeds were posted 2 hours ago and they've got this. And then that feed also goes to our website. So that's going to be it. And we're looking also towards kind of having some campaigns. So this Grow a Row kind of seed steward program, our kind of motto is we provide the seeds, you provide the love, and also what will you save? So looking at kind of working around, and hopefully this is something that we all kind of get behind, that if we can get some hashtags and kind of really create a movement to get locally grown seeds, that would be phenomenal. And kind of lastly, I just want to kind of highlight some of the resources that we offer. So as I mentioned, I'm with the Richmond Grows Seed Lending Library. We do have resources on our website about just the model of starting a basic seed library, but over time it seemed kind of silly for people to be going to our website to get that. So I created the seedlibraries.net website. And so on the seedlibraries.net website, you can see start a seed library. There's COVID resources, special projects such as natives. And then the idea is also, how do we have more of a conversation among seed librarians? Like, what are you doing in the time of COVID? And we do have a COVID website resource on the seedlibraries.net, but it's a constantly changing situation. Now that things, at least where I am, are loosening up a bit. I know in other places it's not that happening at this moment. We have this Upbeat forum. And the Upbeat forum is a place where you can join in on a conversation. You can ask questions. You can find resources that you want from other people, challenges that you have. It's a great place to kind of engage with other seed librarians. And, I'm a big person about minimizing email. So if you want to particularly follow a hashtag, like I want to follow native hashtag COVID, hashtag seed libraries, that's a way for you to kind of really engage with that. I also do want to kind of mention that we do have a survey. So I should be probably putting that in there. I'm actually going to put that, sorry, I am going to put in the Upbeat resources into the chat for people if you want to join our online forum. And you do need to, just let you know, you do need to, if you do sign up for the Upbeats, you also need to confirm your subscription. So please, please, please make sure you do that. We do have a form. Oops, so we do have a survey for this session. And if you could fill that in, that would be great. It just gives us information. This is our first time we've done this, obviously having our little hiccups along the way, but we're just, we're getting started. We're all volunteers. We super appreciate you taking your time out, because I know many of you are doing this on top of your other jobs, or in addition to that. And so the links to the recorded sessions are going to be emailed to you via Eventbrite soon. We're only going to make the recordings available for 2 weeks. So please, if there is a session you didn't get to, make sure that you take the time to watch it in the next 2 weeks. And once again, if you've got that link to the survey, oopsie daisy, that was not what I want to do. The link to the survey is in the session, including my little notes here, posted a few times. And we are on social media. We have a Twitter account. We have a Facebook account. The Instagram account, we are trying to get access to it. It was through a former seed librarian. But you can follow us on all of those. It'd be great if you have a phone. If you have a phone and you could take your phone out and you are on social media and you want to post something about your seed library, what you've done in COVID right now, what you're excited about. Like, we would love you to just take out your phone or whatever device you use for social media, take a moment to follow us, share out your stories, share out a photo of your garden, hashtag us with, hashtag Seed Library Summit, hashtag save share. That's really going to allow us to amplify our voices so other people can find your projects, learn about what you're doing, learn about, how, what challenges you've had and how did you overcome them. So really excited that your guys are all on this journey with us. I can see that Kelly has put in, based on seed varieties, we use small measuring spoons. Absolutely. Do not count out. We do the same thing when we give it to we give out our seed packaging. We're like, figure out about 15 seeds. What does it look like? And then get a spoon and put it in. So you're not, when you're packaging seeds, make it easy for yourself. And I don't know if I can unmute my co-human beings here. Let's see. So I'm going to unmute Carrie and Kelly and Laurel. And if any of you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and then the three of us can kind of, or four of us, sorry, 3 plus 1. I teach math, just in case, didn't know I'm a science and math teacher on the. Let's see. Do you have concerns about seed exposure to weather for outdoor locations? We are in the Bay Area. Great question. We're in the Bay Area. So sadly, it does not rain. I think we've had probably our last rain until, what do you think, Laurel? October?
Oh, actually, rain might be coming.
Rain might be coming. So we have not opened our seed libraries. We're actually opening. Mine's open right now. And the other ones are going to be opening on Monday. Most of them, we have about half indoors, half outdoors. And they go quickly enough that we haven't really had to worry too much about.
What are you looking for? Don't you put it on your windowsill up there?
Yeah. Don't leave it, nobody.
One of
I
you,
leave it in your bike.
just gonna, okay. I don't know who that was. Okay. So let's see. Do you have concerns about seed exposure to weather? And after that was one I just answered. How do you think COVID will impact the future of sustainable food systems? What do you guys think?
Watching how hard it was to get seeds this past year, we were lucky, and Kelly really pushed us that, unfortunately, we're doing a lot of ordering. We put our orders in December, and there was only one type of seed we were not able to get, and they canceled it on us a few weeks ago because they said they had a crop failure. I worry that unless people are learning to save their own seeds, I think it's going to be a little harder to get a hold of them in the quantities.
Yeah. And there's a great article, I wish I had it at my fingertips, but Gary Paul Nabhan, who is a major seed saver, one of the co-founders of the Native Seed Search, he wrote a beautiful article recently about COVID. And one of the things that people don't realize is, as Carrie was just mentioning, there's kind of a rush on seeds. So anybody that tried to order seeds last year realizes that buying seeds, you can't always expect going to the grocery store, getting toilet paper, whatever you want, that we are all interconnected. And then I hope if nothing else, that we understand the interconnectedness. A lot of people do not realize that, that we are, sorry, I'm trying to do too many things here. So basically when there was a rush on the seeds, they go into their back stock, and those seeds are not going to be grown again because maybe they can only grow 3 brassicas, and they went into their back stock. That seed might not be grown out for 3 more years. And so there's going to be shortages. And as a result, that is going to be impact later availability of seeds. So you might be able to still get kale, but you might not be able to get the kale that you want. Mm-hmm. And I think that I hope that people understand that, as Carrie mentioned, if we grow it ourselves, we're going to have it. And if we rely on outside sources, we might have issues.
We couldn't afford the Amish snap peas in the quantity we wanted this year. We had to go out and find a new variety.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I think that COVID does highlight the fragility of our supply chain and our food system. And so hopefully one positive outcome could be that we take more seriously that fragility and that we continue the wonderful efforts that folks are doing to build a more resilient web of food security.
Yeah. And I think also the thing is and it kind of came up in the chat, and thank you, Monica, for asking the question about, do you allow us to share like a Richmond Grows and other sites? Do you allow us to do, is our stuff open source? And it is. And I think that we need to work together as a community to figure out how do we deal with this fragility, having these conversations, being part of the upbeats, coming to Seed Library, the Seed Library Summit, posting on social media, what are you doing, so that people know like, oh, what a great idea. I think we need to figure it out together, because this is just the first bump. I mean, I'm not like a super pessimistic person, but it's like, let's be realistic. We've had a pretty easy, normal, climate for the last 100 years. It is unusual in the history of, society. Plus we've had all these extra resources, and it's like, it's going to change. And I think the more we can work it out together in community and be creative, I think the better off we're all going to be. And then Laurel posted the article about Gary Paul Nabhan. So if you want to see that, that is in there as well. And I just want to take one more moment that if you haven't already done so, to please fill in the session survey. We really would benefit, from your feedback. I also want to kind of make a note that we do have another session coming up. It starts in an hour from now. And let's see if I can find the schedule. Actually, Laurel, can you maybe find the schedule for us and put that in the chat?
I'll try.
Great. And thank you, Annika, for the shout out about the seed saving class. Once again, I am offering 2 seed saving in a time of crisis classes, May 8th and May 23rd. And once again, I do talk about traditional seed saving, but I also say, how do you kind of open that up? What considerations might you have, in a time of crisis? And also in a time of crisis is we've lost so much of our genetic diversity. We're really susceptible to disease and pressures and stuff like that. And, the more we can kind of open things up and play with things, like, why do we have to be such purists? I mean, there might be some things that we're very concerned about keeping pure, something that has a story, something that has cultural significance, but also being creative and enjoying our gardens and seeing where the plants want to take us, and listening again to the plants is a really beautiful thing. So I encourage you to take that class that was put in the link. Okay, it looks like that is kind of the end of the questions. So once again, please check out the summit schedule. The next session is in an hour. I want to really thank our panel here. So Kelly and Carrie from Rochester, and Laurel from the Community Seed Exchange. And thank you all for showing up. I know there's so much going on. I really appreciate you doing local seeds in your community and wanting to make a difference. This session will be available for recording in a couple days, hopefully. So check for an Eventbrite list. And it will be available for 2 weeks kind of after the summit is over. So have a great day. And once again, we hope you join us at 1 o'clock for either climate adaptation, starting a seed library, or the One Seed, One Community. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording at this point, assuming I can. Let's see, how do I stop video? Stop sharing. Oops. There we go. That's not the one I want to do. Okay. Anyone can help me with that. I'm just like, stop.